I have hit the recording button, so we're in good shape there. Well, welcome in, guys. Looking forward to having everybody here yet again today. The topic of today and probably over the next couple weeks will end up being U2 and the wedge at second base. So I think we got some good stuff popped on. I've had a lot of conversations with a few people as we go through this, so I'll probably ask them to chime in every now and then, especially if some of them are in the clips so they can talk us through some of the stuff. But I'll go ahead and get started here with just the sheer basics of the wedge and whatnot. And the reason why we picked to start the wedge at U2 is I think the wedge at second base is 360. And if you can grasp the concepts of the wedge at second base, then everything else just is super easy for you. So that's one of the reasons why we just went ahead and decided to start there. So I'll go ahead, share my screen, and kind of talk us through a few different things here as we get rolling. All right, I think I'm sharing it now. Yep, and let me minimize you guys so I don't have to go through this. All right, so a couple keys to the wedge on the bases, excuse me. The first step, and this is kind of all the fundamentals that we'll see in the clips, is that you got to start directly behind the fielder. Now, when we talk about starting directly behind the fielder, we're not saying that you got to like be right behind him so as you can't see anything. Like behind the fielder is a guidance, but we've got to make sure that we can read the throw so that we can see all factors of the play coming in. Now, because the fielder receiving the throw ends up being two of the three elements of a play, the ball fielder and the runner, we want to stay with him because that fielder is going to take us to the ball, and the fielder and the ball then take us to the tag attempt. So that's why we want to start directly behind the fielder, and the distance is big, 5 feet from behind the fielder as well. Step number two, move with the fielder. So if he moves right, left, forward, or backwards, we're going to mimic that same movement. We'll talk about that here in the clips as well. And then quiet steps, understanding that the wedge is 360, and then staying close is probably the biggest adjustment here for many people to go ahead and see. Now, those of you guys that have worked the regional in like the last 2 or 3 years, when we put you guys on the field and talk about the wedge at second base, one of the first things that we do is we draw this arc around. So I kind of want you guys to envision how exactly this will work. Let me see if I can annotate things here. Bring this to life. So if I go ahead and like we have a fielder whose feet are like this, receiving a throw in from right field, we want to start directly behind him, all right? Now, we can't be over in this area simply because that's the runner's path, and we don't want to be either to the left or to the right of this fielder because then we would be in his lateral movement. Now, as this throw comes in and he goes to tag this runner who's sliding in right here, if we stay in this spot, we get straight line because the runner is between us and the tag attempt. So in order to see this tag attempt or the wedge, which is right around in here, we just want to move along the arc to the back side. All right, so that's what we mean by moving along the arc, and that's a concept then that we want to continue to think about. If I clear it and we think about like a fielder receiving the throw from center field, we want to make sure that we are, again, right behind him. Now, many of you guys will say, hey, I need to be in this infield grass for that one. We're going to encourage you to be up into the cutout because, again, as this throw comes in, let's say from center field, he's going to go try and tag this runner coming in. And, again, we can't move this way because that's in the direction of the of the runner. But we want to move back along the arc to get that angle down through the tag attempt. Okay? Left field, I think we'll get the same idea here. So if we're here and this fielder's feet are here and this throw is coming in from the left side, we can't stand right here because, again, that would be in the runner's lane. So here in this case, we kind of take a position right about here as well so that we're still not in the lateral track of that runner or the fielder. And then depending on how exactly he goes to make a tag, if he spins around this way, we'll move around the arc here. But if he comes around this way, okay, kind of same deal. We just got to make sure we pinch in and wedge ourselves there. And we'll go through some of those examples over the next couple of weeks. But at the same time, what we at least wanted to do here was go through this concept of the wedge being 360 and the idea then of moving along the arc. I'll pause there. Any questions for me on that? All righty. Well, I'll continue to move on here. A couple different things that are big concepts here. I think one of the biggest things is to stay close And if you take a look at this clip right here, I mean, this guy's right in the thick of things. And as you see, we've got to move with the fielder because here's the tag attempt. Again, if you can think about yourself being on the inside of the diamond right around in here, you're straight lined on that tag attempt. You can't tell where that tag's been applied and whether or not the runner has reached the base yet. So likewise, if you're back around in here, still straight lined on there. Right there is that wedge that we're looking at. Okay? And staying close to the play gives us a wider viewing angle into the play to go ahead and get the call right. And that's exactly what happens here. Now, here's another good clip. This is of Major League Baseball umpire Will Little, who, in my opinion, is probably one of the better ones out there, and not only the concept of the wedge, but also teaching the wedge. He's at second base here. So when we talk about the wedges 360, I'll go ahead and put this one in play. And right here, you can kind of see his initial starting position. Okay, Will Little's initial starting position with R1 only. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But as this play develops, there's a shift on. So this is the shortstop fielding the ball. And this tag attempt goes, watch Will Little here in the corner of our screen work the arc to the back end of the base. He knows that this runner is going to try and slide to the inside of the base because the fielder is coming from the outside. So he knows his wedge is going to be right in here. And if he stays inside, the runner will be between him and the tag attempt. So as he continues to move forward, he just moves right along that arc, gets his distance on this foot race play. You can see him taking those steps along the arc there, tags applied, and then Will does a fantastic job. So many people talk about timing, about like, hey, you need to count to 2 or 3 before making a call. All proper timing is proper use of eyes. And what we mean by that is that you should literally look up at the baseball in the fielder's glove and then make your call. That is where you get your timing. And that's exactly what Will Little does here. You see he continues to step. So there's his quiet steps. There's a collision. He's got to make sure this fielder holds onto the ball. Look at where Will's eyes are right now. He's looking at that fielder, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally, he comes up with it. There's voluntary release. And then boom, now Will can go ahead and punch him out. Okay, so nice job there by Will, giving us a good example to go through again. I'll kind of play this one back through. And as this happens, and as this tag attempt gets closer, you'll note that Will moves along that arc, maintains that 5 to 7 feet distance, and right there has a great look as to where this tag attempt is applied based upon where the runner's at. Good proper use of eyes for timing, and that allows him to go ahead and make a good-looking call there. All right. Anybody have any questions for me here on the concept of the arc and getting closer? I think those are the two major things for us at least to address here as we go through the wedge.
Dude, this is Pete.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
On that first one that you showed where they were using the slide, it appeared to me that the umpire was way too close because based on that, there was no way that he could tell the way he is looking whether the tag was applied first before the hand hit the base.
Yeah, and this is also from a drill, and I think it's an over-exaggeration. If you could probably put him a step back, like put his left foot where his right foot is, then we're probably where we need to be.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I think it's just he overcompensated in the drill. Good pickup.
Too, I just want to point out, I know that we'll talk soon about it, but in the clip with Will, he never gets set. He is constantly moving around that arc, and I think that's something that is important versus years past where we find our spot, we get set, and we make the call. He is constantly moving along that arc and looking and leaning in for that play with his upper body, but his feet never get set as maybe we would have done 5-10 years ago. He's constantly moving along the arc, and I think that's a really good example, a clinic in a real life game situation put on by Will there.
Yeah, here's a great look at what DJ's talking about. So you can see Will in his initial starting position in this clip, and we'll talk about that spot here in just a second. But see where he starts, and just watch Will. Don't watch the play. Keep watching Will at second base. He just continues to move along that arc. And like DJ said, he just continues to move even throughout the duration of it. Now, like he's set on that one, and the replay cut that one out. But like he's set when all that tag attempt happens. but very slight controlled movement will get you into that spot. You want to keep fighting for that spot.
Yep, absolutely. Controlled movement, like we talked about in mechanics frames last year.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about initial starting positions, and this is kind of counterintuitive to what we do in like a 2-umpire system, or even in a 3-umpire system. So here we have a 4-umpire system, and my suggestion here is that with an R1 only situation, you two can start in C, and we'll kind of see what exactly advantages are there. So this is a wide scale view of a 4-umpire system here, and U2 with R1 only is here in second base. And if for those of you guys that have been at the regional before, anybody remember why I suggest we be at C here? Well, I guess this kind of
everything's coming right at you.
Yeah, right. So you only have to take a couple steps into it. You don't necessarily have to fight for position for anything. And then realistically, remember in a four umpire system with R1 only, if U3 leaves, the plate has third base, and all you've got to do as U2 is wedge up. Now, if U1 leaves, then in that case, if we have to come back through and the plate umpire's late, everything's still in front of us. So it's a little bit of a counterintuitive look, but at the same time, all this action on R1, the primary action, gives you a better view on this stuff as he's coming in to the play. Here's a steal play for us, and I'll kind of talk and focus mostly on steal plays now. Ricky here is in C, in a pretty tight C here, so that he can, let me move this controller here. On this steal attempt, you'll see his controlled movement of getting right behind the fielder, number one. He's right directly behind the fielder, and then he'll be able to continue to move along the arc as necessary. Now, he gets a little bit of a late jump on here, but at the same time, he's wedged up on the backside there, and he's able to walk right into that wedge from C. Now, remember, the good measurement of wedge in a still shot is if you take the outstretched arm of the tag attempt and draw it 90 degrees straight back, you should see the umpire. And right there is Ricky. Okay? The only thing I would say that Rick has done wrong in this case, and it's really not even that big of a deal, when he views this one, that's okay. And as DJ pointed out, we want to continue to move along that arc. And if you take a look at this slide, the runner basically continues his overslide and makes contact with Rick in his position. Now, if he continues to move along the arc, you'll note that, again, the idea is 360. The play continues to spin because the fielder is continuing to move, and so too is the runner. So as the umpire, we should probably take another step to Rick's right here. And if he takes a step to that right, he is still in the wedge, and then he's no longer in the direct path of the overslide by the runner. Another good look at C position. Notice how tight the initial starting position is here. Rick was probably a little too deep. If you remember Will Little's clip at the start, he was right about this same vicinity from second base. Obviously you don't want to inhibit this fielder's ability to make a play, the shortstop's ability to make a play, but you want to get as close as you possibly can by all factors of the play. That way you have more time to react and a better wedge here too. Now, Dave Sandor is our second base umpire here, and he literally walks into this wedge. Again, if you go outstretched arm of the fielder and go 90 degrees back, right there you should find our umpire. He may or may not should be about another step or two closer to second base. I'm fine with this positioning. And again, continue to move along the way, or along that arc, so that you don't have to worry. You can see Dave there is kind of a little bit worried about runners coming into him. So he should take another step to his right as that tag attempt was applied. All right. One more look here at C. This is from the 50-70 region, or 50-70 World Series. Jordan Leslie's our second base umpire in here from Michigan. And, as this steal attempt happens on this pitch out, I'll go ahead and let it run here for a little bit. You'll see that Jordan's initial starting position is about right where Will Little's at. Now, the only thing we're going to have to do with the second baseman covering here is fight for space here with the shortstop. So like we literally want to go back to basketball and box this guy out, because this is our space and our ground. We want to make sure that this shortstop goes behind us so that he's not in front of us while trying to make the call. Now, where exactly Jordan's at as this tag attempt happens is right where we want. And take a look. He's still stepping in. I think we can all say that his head throughout this, take a look at his head, is pretty stable. And even though he starts to narrow down the distance and find his wedge, outstretched arm, there he is with the lean, His head still. He continues to move throughout that one, so he has the best viewing angle possible, and he's right in there to make that call. All right. Another better look here once we get to the replay at this whole concept of taking the steal play from C and using C with R1 only. Here again, we see his position. The shortstop's covering in this case, so he doesn't necessarily have to fight for ground here. But you can see he continues to walk, good controlled movement into this tag attempt. And then as you see him go ahead and put this tag down, again, Jordy's in great spot here. Good lean here, good control movement along the arc. And then he's able to call the runner safe. All right. When we go to this replay, right there is a great look at what exactly Jordan had there. And you cannot get this look anywhere else, even if you're on the inside. And on a 50-70 diamond, and many of us have been on, like you feel pretty narrowed and pretty far trapped in there too. But in a multi-member crew with the ability of sneaking to the outside there and still staying close so that you can rotate accordingly, your angles and whatnot are a lot better in the wedge on that steal play there. And I'll let this replay happen and then pause for questions here from the steal play in the C position. Again, great starting position. Notice that he is shallow enough to get to second base, good enough to rotate if it comes to it. But again, he's not in the way of the shortstop trying to make a play. Pitch out happens. And then here, Jordan's steps right into the wedge are great. Okay. Right into it from C. Good controlled movement. Continues to move. Stays 5 to 7 feet. Right about 5 feet to the target distance. Right in position to make a call. All right. All right. Thoughts, questions? What exactly do you have from me for this idea, this new age idea of taking stuff from C with R1 only? Questions, ideas? Well, cool. That'll work. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take them. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, question. Positioning differences in a multi-man crew from field sizes.
Yeah, and honestly, in a 4-umpire system, there are some major league guys, even on the big diamond, that'll go into like B and C as they would be on the outside. Now, we're not talking about like on the rim of the dirt, like in the Will Little clip and then in Jordan's clip there too. You'll notice that they're up. They're just not inside. Now, you can choose your initial starting position, and I'm going to go through a couple different examples with you two on the inside and how to find that wedge as well. But quite honestly, it's up to you and what you're comfortable in executing as you two as to whether you take an outside position or an inside. The only thing I would caution you of taking an outside position on the bigger diamonds, the 70-foot diamond, the 90-foot diamond, is not to get so deep that you can't rotate to the inside if one of your wing guys leaves. Does that make sense, Phil?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Good point. Now, again, I'll continue to talk a little bit about steal plays here too. So if I go back to sharing my screen and we go back to this here, you can also still use B. But, you know, I just kind of want to give the picture as to if you're somebody who wants to try and figure out, do I want to use B? Do I want to use C? It's kind of up to you here. This umpire here is in B. Notice again the shallowing distance, the narrow distance towards second base. The idea then, remember here, is that as this play happens, in this case the shortstop covers second base, like I'm going to have to get right behind him. So the closer I can start and the tighter I can start, obviously not directly up the middle, but the closer I can start to that one, the better off we're going to be here to line up the wedge and the more time that we're going to have there too. This throw attempt happens, and it's kind of a no play whatsoever here. But as you see, the fielder moves up to cover the ball, and then or to catch the ball, and then so do I. I move up and along that same line, and there's a good look at the arc to go ahead and follow as this play happens. Okay? That's kind of some ideas of taking it from B. Now, here's another look at taking a steal play from B. And again, the concept here is you're going to have to fight for space here. All right, so there's a steal play. And again, like we're going to have to fight for some space here with the shortstop if the second baseman's covering, and vice versa if the shortstop is covering. Here, Gary Murnahan does a good job of fighting for that space. He takes that space first and gets pretty close to the play. Tag attempt is getting ready to happen. outstretched arm, we should be able to go straight back 90 degrees and find Gary. But just like we saw in the other couple clips, he needs to move about another step to his right. As you see here, we kind of get locked in and set as the tag attempt applies. You can continue to step with your head still, and that's exactly what needs to happen, because the overslide here runs right into Gary. But if he takes a step further to his right as this tag attempt is applied, then it continues to move along that arc, then he's out of the way. So I don't want you to think that he's too close, because that's not exactly the case. And that's why he got ran into. That's not it. He just forgot to take one more step as the tag attempt goes, and that's kind of like the next level of wedge. First level is getting comfortable close enough. Secondly is finding it, and then third is continuing to move along the arc so that you stay out of the runner's overslide. And then good timing
on that
here.
one.
Yeah, go ahead.
On that one, he's got a good view of the tag. Is he still got a good view of the runner's feet getting to the bag?
Yeah, I think so. That's a good question, because we actually talked about that in the post game when we were looking at these clips. So again, if he can move one more step to the right, he's probably got a better look. Like where he's at right now is directly into that runner's overstep, or like his overslide. But if you go one more step to the right, then he can see all that stuff perfectly. But George, and I'm glad you brought this up, because if you're close enough, remember your viewing angle is bigger. If Gary was a couple steps back further from this play, he would have really had a hard time judging whether or not that tag was applied before the runner got to the base. And that's because his angle would have been much more narrow with a stance further away, or a position further away. Him being closer here allows him to essentially compensate, or gives him a little bit more house money, so to speak, to play with, a little bit more margin for error. Good question. Here's another good look. I think he's done a fantastic job of fighting for space here. His distance is fine, but again, he should keep coming to his right. Keep coming to his right. And as you see here, he gets locked in right when that tag happens. Your head can be still while your feet are moving to get you in the ideal spot. That was one thing Jordan did well. That's one thing that Will Little did really well in his clip as well. They've got a couple replays here. Go ahead.
Stu, do you think part of that is we're still adjusting to the wedge? And because a lot of us for a lot of years have spent a lot of time saying, hey, make sure you're set. Make sure you're set.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting to the wedge, but then you're going, well, okay, I need to be set now. And
Yes.
You haven't kind of continued that thought process.
Mike, I'm glad you brought that up, because like at least in my journey with the wedge, like the first thing I had to overcome was getting closer. Then the second thing I had to overcome was, just as you said, no longer trying to be exactly set, and I still fight this, exactly set at the time of the tag attempt. Like I've got to trust that if I can take a controlled step, my head's still going to be still. And again, like the more I can continue to move, like you just mentioned here, I think that's like the next level, or the next step as we continue to evolve and get adjusted to work in this mechanic. So, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, because essentially Gary's a mechanic that he's using here shows the growth. I mean, number one, he's okay with being close. Secondly, he's able to know where the wedge is at. And then the third step is just to continue to move with the fielder, because you never know when you get locked in, whether that spot is going to be taken away from you as the best viewing spot, or if you're going to luck out into being in a great spot.
Well, and I think part of that too is since we're making controlled movements going in, that helps us keep our head still if we continue the movement.
Yep.
Whereas if we're running to get to our spot, then you're making it harder.
Exactly. And like you just said, starting closer is great. I think this one's a good look. I think this is Gary again, but take a look at his initial starting position at the time of the pitch. Like he's not on the grass line, and this is a 60-foot diamond, right? I mean, he's right in there at time of pitch. Right here is where he's set for time of pitch. He's able to anticipate this one, and then he continues to move in on this one. Great look here. Yeah. The runner's foot, and we'll see it from the back end, is on the base as that tag attempt's applied, and everybody else on the diamond thinks he got him. And then the shortstop is like, yeah, you got that one right. I hate to admit it. If you take a look at this here, foot's on the base right there. Tag is just now coming up. And I think this one was challenged, and the call of safe was actually upheld on the field. But again, if you take a look where Gary's is at, notice that he like locks in and stops moving right at the time that the tag attempt is applied. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we try and avoid. Is, you know, as this tag attempt goes, keep stepping. Your head will be still. Keep stepping further and further to the right. Now, I mean, you take outstretched arm, one more step to the right, and Gary is where he needs to be instead of being right in the overslide path. Okay, and instead he should be like right around in here. Any questions there on stuff from C?
I think a key thing is to make sure that we do our best to get to the fielder. I think that shows Gary did, like you said, had great growth in getting to the wedge and finding the wedge, but got set at the bag. I think for so long we've done our best to get to the bag and find the wedge. If we give up on the bag, because let's say that situation happens, that tag pulls that fielder 3 or 4 feet further down the line, that play is not happening at the bag anymore. So if we get on that fielder now versus running straight to the bag and finding the wedge, we won't find a wedge at the bag every time. We find the wedge with the fielder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try and draw and show you what exactly DJ's talking about here. If this throw would take the fielder, and let's say the fielder tries right up here, that tag attempt is happening right here, right on the backside of that runner. If Gary stays where he's at, he's straight lined on that tag. So again, that's why he wants to continue to use that arc. And that arc then, like, you know, you think about it, is this circular path here. We know we can't come in right here because that's where the runner is sliding into. And we'll still be straight line here because the runner's between us. So if we can continue to get on that track and follow him up the line this way by staying on the arc here, then we'll be in good position to see that tag, that swipe tag on the back side there. Good point out. All right, the last thing that I want to cover here as we move on here is to go ahead and talk about back picks into the base so that we can kind of understand and get an idea of where exactly we want to be positioned here as that replay continues on through. So these back picks, and like I said, I'm kind of using a counterintuitive approach. So if you think about R1 only, suggesting that you should be in C, with like R2 only, or in other cases, potentially being in a different spot. And I'll get there here in just a second. Now, I did mention that on the 90-foot diamond, I would talk to you about taking stuff inside. So many of us are so used to working two-man, and in two-man, where a lot of us want to go ahead and start, and we have to because we have to be a little bit more mobile, is that tangent line obviously right here, and like our feet are more positioned here. In a multi-member crew, we can work our wedge and get a little bit tighter back towards the grass line here. Now, obviously, we don't want to be up the middle because that's the danger zone, but a little bit further back towards the base, because you got to remember here that the throw is coming from the catcher. So this fielder is going to try and tag the front of the base. That means the runner is going to try and slide from the furthest point away from that tag attempt, which means then that as he comes in here, our wedge means that we've got to be able to see the backside of this base. So our only chance at trying to get there is to stay as tight as we can to that baseline. And as that runner leaves here, I'll clear this one here because this umpire does a decent job here getting there, is as this play develops, you see how this umpire stays super tight to that grass line, because now he's able to see all parts of the base. If we can't see all parts of the base here, then we're kind of at the mercy of what exactly could happen. I've also talked about how the wedge has, there's always two wedges to every play. There's the inside wedge and the outside wedge. So if you think about using what we talked about on the smaller diamonds and even in the 70-foot diamond and taking plays on the backside, if you go back here, outstretched arm at 90 degrees, your position would be right about in there. But here we have outstretched arms again, because it's 360, right there's our look. Okay, so we can kind of see how exactly that is. But the key then is getting as tight as possible, in this case, to the back, so we're not taking ourselves away from it. DJ, you got anything else on that?
No, like Stu said, I think that's the most important thing. There's two sides to every wedge. Like he said, it's 360. And this is the position that I use with R1. I'm tight to the cutout, tight to the grass line, and just trail the ball in, keeping your head on a swivel and walk with the ball in. Keeping the head on a swivel, nice controlled movement, and a really good lean. You should be able to see everything there.
Yeah. Now I'll go ahead and stop the clips and whatnot. I think the next segment of this one will be taking a look at some back picks, as I kind of started to introduce. I thought those were the clips next, but we'll take a look at those on Wednesday or next week. And then we'll also talk about the concept of slipping or rimming to the outside and all this stuff too, so we can maintain our wedge on the backside. I think the biggest takeaways from today in this are those three major steps. Number one, is getting as close to the fielder within 5 feet of him and getting directly behind him. Secondly, understanding that the wedge is 360. It's that arc around, and we want to move around that arc constantly. And then third, those quiet steps allow us to continue to move so we're in the best spot possible. That way our head and eyes are always between the runner and the tag attempt. I'll go ahead and hang on for a couple questions and whatnot here. If you guys have to run, feel free. But I'll hang on here for questions if anybody's got anything.
Hey, Stu, you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Well, I just want to put in a little kicker for the old guys that were taught by some of the best teachers ever in Little League, right? In Indy. And I'm saying I'm learning, let's just say I'm learning anew for some of the things that those guys taught us that were gospel in the Bible, and how we, for the last, 20 years been, that's how we did it. And now I'm buying into the wedge. I love the wedge. I've been doing it ever since I heard the word, and in every game that I do, and I enjoy it, but it's old habits are hard to break, pal. They railed it in on us. How keep your, get set, stay there, keep your head, every time you take a step, your eyes bounce, all that stuff. But I'm glad to see that, I couldn't follow some of that of their teaching because it didn't work for me. The wedge thing works for me.
Good.
And taking the quiet steps, which I never heard of that until until this, but I was a quiet step guy. I mean, you just have to move with the play, because getting straight lined is a real thing. I mean, it happens to everybody, and it happens a lot just because you don't move and everybody else is moving, but hey, I'm on board with it. I love these things, man. And thanks a lot for all that.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, Sam, this is Brian. I'm one of the old guys too. And, you guys didn't learn anything back in the old days, so just learn all this new stuff from these young whippersnappers.
Brian Wild.
Yeah.
Well, to agree with Sammy, if you've been doing this since '96, like I have, you got about 20 years of uneducating yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can do everything with the old style. You can do everything the way you've been taught, but even if you've guessed the right position, and you've got exactly where you're supposed to be and exactly where the old manual told you need to be, you still got a very good chance. And I had it in a game last night where you're going to have a play that, because you're set and you're where you're supposed to be by the old standard, you're not going to see something that's crucial to the play, which means you're either going to have to get help from your partner hoping that he saw it, or you're just going to have to take your best guess and go with it. So the wedge takes work, but I'm trying to get used to it and use it where I can. If I can get on more than just a two-man umpire crew, I'd like to use it even more.
Yeah. Well, guys, everything seems to be wrapping up. I think we got less than a minute here before our time expires. So I'll let everybody go. Thanks for joining us. I'll put all that stuff back out for you to take a look at for next week, and we'll continue on this journey with you two at second base. See you guys.